All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for coming to today's event, Indigenous Uses of Ayahuasca. My name is Kenneth, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Maria Fe Gebara. Maria Fe Gebara is a Brazilian anthropologist whose research considers the Amazon as a site where nature, culture, politics, and spirituality are enmeshed. She's been analyzing the challenges to anthropocentric attitudes from diverse perspectives, investigating local traditions and practices to understand alternative configurations between human and other than human beings. She is now working on her own book called Chanting Spring. Using the clarion call of Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring as a touchstone, the book maps out our disconnection from the natural world and the consequences this has wrought on us, weaving a narrative of reconnection detailing many of her personal experiences with indigenous peoples in the Amazon and offering a mix of science and traditional knowledge as we transition to a post-pandemic world. So Faye will give her talk, and then we'll open it up for questions. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for everyone who's here. Thank you. And thanks for the society for hosting me today. I'm going to present about the indigenous uses of ayahuasca and looking a bit to the history of the vine, what is it used for, and some of the perceptions of the indigenous groups that I learned from, to whom I'm very, very thankful for to what I'm going to share here. So thanks to them, I know a little bit to be able to be here and share with you. And I'll then connect it to the biomedical practice and research of ayahuasca. And we'll finish with some personal thoughts and 2 movies. And hopefully we'll have time for everything. Okay. So, first was one of the scholars to study hallucinogens and culture. And to him, the use of psychoactive plants such as ayahuasca is what actually shaped the cultural history of these traditional societies. And they are used to keep their traditions alive. So, to other scholars, such as Marlene Dobkin de Rios, she also suggests that to study this culturally, it's important to understand what she calls the antecedent variables, which are very important to how the substance will act in a cultural context, which is the biological factors, the psychological factors, the social interaction factors, and the cultural factors. What some have called it in the psychedelic context as the set and setting theory. And then it's also important to consider the multidisciplinary of the study. So this is what I'm going to try to bring in here. So different disciplines together, and different knowledges together, so we can look at the ayahuasca use from different perspectives. So the first thing that draws attention regarding the study of these types of plants in the Americas is their widespread dissemination and the large number of species that are used to alter consciousness. And the reason for such a use being more than in the old world has been pointed out to be more cultural than botanical. And it would be a consequence of the fact that indigenous cultures are largely hunter-gatherer societies with their spiritual practices based on shamanism, which normally value the use of mystical experiences that would be induced by these plants. In contrast, the world cultures lost their appreciation for such plants when they transitioned into pastoral and agricultural societies. And in such societies, the divinity and power of gods started to be more prominent than of the plants. And hunter-gatherer societies, they are also constantly under pressure to explore new plants in their environment, both for food and sometimes accidentally for rituals and ceremonies. But in any case, the phenomenon of ingesting these substances, whether of plant or animal origin, as well as altering consciousness through them, but also through other forms of alteration, is a universal phenomenon as old as humanity itself. And some authors consider it the origin of all religions, and some even argue that it was the ingestion of such substances that helped us evolve throughout times. As, for example, McKenna's theory about the stone ape that proposes that the consumption of psilocybin fungi played a crucial role in the evolution of consciousness and the development of human brain in terms of self-reflection, language, and culture. So, moving to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a word from the Quechua language, commonly translated into English as vine of the soul. And it refers to an Amazonian vine, scientifically named Bicaapi, and to a brew known also by other names, such as Camarampi, Uni, Nishipai, Yagé, Daime, Vegetal, among many others. And most of these names belongs to Amazonian indigenous peoples that use ayahuasca, which nowadays are around 160 nations. And the brew is prepared according to different recipes, including combinations with up to 90 different potential plant additives, but the most common are P. viridis and D. cabrerana. And P. viridis is also known as chacruna, from the Quechua as well, meaning to mix. And it is this species that contains DMT. And much like the classical psychedelics, ayahuasca use has been associated with a range of positive therapeutic outcomes, including the alleviation of depression, addictions, and but for the indigenous people, a concept that is more directly related to their practices would be the one of medicine instead of molecule or psychedelic. So, who has tried ayahuasca here? Just to have an idea. Okay, so many of the indigenous I work with, they say the better way of knowing it is trying. So, I hope this inspires you as well. So, here you can see all the places that Bicaapi grows as native species. And here is a list of all the different indigenous groups that traditionally use it. And there are probably more, but this is what has been constructed during the indigenous ayahuasca conferences that are happening in the past years. So here is another list. This is the list of the different types of plant additives that you can mix with Bicaapi. So there are many different species. And the reason I'm showing all these different lists is just to give you a better idea of the complexity of the different uses of ayahuasca. So it's not like I could even present all about it here, because I think it would take me like a lifetime to even learn about all these different recipes and uses and complexities. But I'll show now a timeline quickly, because I think it's important to understand the historical facts about ayahuasca. Unfortunately, it's not based all on indigenous, but in what is written about ayahuasca. So it's like the historical representation of it to us as white and Westerns. Botanists have suggested that the Bicaapi probably emerged during the late Ice Age. It is not possible to say when the practice of drinking ayahuasca originated, but there is archaeological evidence that suggests its use occurs since 2000 BC. The earliest written account of ayahuasca was done by Jesuit missionaries, but for the most part, their diabolical fears didn't allow the brew easy entry into European and American imagination. This happened only on mid-1800s when botanists Richard Spruce and geographer Manuel Villavicencio experimented with the brew themselves and described their cosmic journeys. Here I included a picture of Bikapi first descriptions and collection by Spruce, which is in the Kew Gardens but private collection. I had the opportunity to be there and check it out in person because I took some members of the Honey Queen people in Brazil there, and so they opened the private collection to the indigenous people to show the first collection of the plant to them, and they were feeling very honored to have the indigenous themselves there as well. But although Spruce collection and description of Bikapi predates any other published accounts, the credit for the earliest published reports of ayahuasca belongs to Manuel Villavicencio, a geographer, who in 1858 wrote of the use of ayahuasca in sorcery and divination on the upper Napo River. The experience made him feel he was flying to most marvelous places. He reported that natives using this drink were able to foresee and answer accurately in difficult cases, to ascertain when a relative is sick, to welcome foreign travelers, among other things. But then came the rubber boom. And indigenous people's cultures were almost exterminated, but ayahuasca use didn't disappear. Different chemists started to name the active ingredients of ayahuasca until the alkaloid was first isolated in the 1920s and then finally in the late 30s. Shen and Shen published an article affirming that different compounds previously identified were all the same as harmine. And it is the harmine that makes it possible to DMT to be orally active. Then in the 40s, Brazilian chemist Osvaldo Gonçalves extracted the DMT molecule from Mimosa tenuiflora due to his experiences with the Pancaru indigenous people and their Jurema wine, which is another type of ayahuasca. And he named it Nigerine, discovering its psychedelic properties that were after recognized as a natural compound, followed by the self-experiments of Hungarian psychiatrist Stefan Zara, who actually got the credits for the discovery of its psychoactive properties instead of Osvaldo. And since the 60s, with the spread of different ayahuasca religions around the world and with the works of ethnobotanist Terence McKenna and anthropologist Jeremy Narby, ayahuasca got really popular. It was in Brazil during the 90s that the first study on health and safety related issues started. And then 20 years later, Brazilian neuroscientists first scanned the brains of people drinking ayahuasca. And after then, ayahuasca became the subject of many studies that have been debated in different arenas, including the World Ayahuasca Conferences organized by ICEERS. And another important arena of such debates is the Indigenous Ayahuasca Conference, now in its 4th edition. It happens in the Amazon just with indigenous people from different groups. And although being legal in many places, we now have what has been called the ayahuasca diaspora, with many retreats happening both in the forest and all around the world, being organized by indigenous and non-indigenous people. Numerous patents on DMT have been filed, as well as different trials to study it in startups and pharmaceutical companies. And the first medical grade drug candidate of ayahuasca is being developed this year. So, just to give an idea, there are many types of the brew depending on what is mixed and how it is brewed. The most used one is called the yellow ayahuasca, but indigenous people affirm that the different kinds have a variety of effects and they may have different chemical compositions. And the botanical identification of all the varieties has not yet been possible, but the different kinds have native names and classification. And for this presentation, I'll cover the aspects associated with the indigenous perceptions and uses and cosmologies around ayahuasca in two different linguistic groups. The first of them is the Panu linguistic group, and there are 5 groups that I brought here as examples of the Panu-speaking people. The first one is the Kaxinawa, also known as the Honey Queen. They are mainly based in Brazil, and they call ayahuasca Nishipan, meaning the wire of enchantment. For them, Nishipan is never taken alone. Chanting and being in a group are a great part of their ritual, as everything for them is actually permeated by a spirit. And being in a group and chanting, it helps to deal with the challenges of this spiritual world. So they call this spirit or this soul Iushin, which is nothing supernatural, but actually it's a vital force that every being has. And in that sense, nature and humans are the same. So these other states of consciousness are to them directly related to Nishipan, but also to the dreams, which are a way of perceiving what they call Yushinity of the world. So this other side of the world. Both dreams and Nishipan visions are the true visions of no ordinary reality in their view, and where they can actually connect to this vital force that permeates all beings, which are for them the way of experiencing it as well. So the ingestion of Nishipai is also considered essential in preparing the individual for death, and it's actually the way that we will not get scared about death, and it's intimately linked to this sort of like post-mortem life. It is through the ingestion of Nishipai that the individual becomes aware of this separation between what they call the Bedu Yushin, the seen spirit, the conscious one, and the body. It is also through the consumption of Nishipai that one can acquire the necessary strength to face the spiritual battle with what they call the giant jaguar, which is like the guardian of this path through this celestial village, how they call where we go after death. And this would prevent the jaguar is there to prevent the Bedu Yushin from reaching its final destination. So through the use of Nishipai, you were strong enough to fight the jaguar and reach this final destination. So the more the individual understands this separation through the use of Nishipai, the more prepared they will be to undertake this ultimate journey to this celestial village. For the Yawanawa, also from Brazil, ayahuasca is the sacred vine. They name it as Uni, and by doing so, they teach us about unit and how the rituals and journeys through Uni ensure that the relationship between humans and other than human beings is one of union, of balance, of reciprocation. So taking Uni is actually an opportunity to unite and expand the family. And here family refers to this extended family of humans and other than human beings. And it's through this engagement and interaction that they are able to understand the natural world. For the Yaminawa, based in Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia, they call it Shori. And for them, a person is actually composed of 3 different parts: the yora, the body, the physical aspect of the person; the jiawaka, the shadow, the everyday consciousness, the mind; and the wero yoshi, which is the spirit, the vital essence. So unlike the jiawaka, which is strongly connected to the body and represents the person's personality, The Yoshi, has a tenuous connection to the body and can leave the body during the dreams and under the influence of Shori. For them, also, everything that exists has a Yoshi, this spirit. So contact with the Yoshi is desired and necessary as it provides you with knowledge. And this knowledge comes through visions and also, again, through dreams. So the time and space of the spiritual world are those of dreams and visions, not of the knowledge per se and the perception. They also use Shori to initiate the boys to its adulthood, and there is also this concept of Bai-Iri, is what they call the land of the dead, and is the space of Shori per excellence, is where everyone is in this sort of like permanent state of ecstasy, and where you get to see everything. And they also have their shamanic chants that they call Koshiuchi. It is what actually facilitates this journey, the healing, and this is very similar to the Yawanawa culture as well. And I'll show a short video on their chants at the end. And then we have the Sharanawa from Peru that call it Ondi and Rami. The reasons for its conception among them is to see the cause of an illness, to learn and understand the world, and to travel and to see things that exist beyond their community. And they believe that the best visions come actually with the second dose. So they say you need to be curious to go for your second dose of ayahuasca in a ritual, because it gives you better visions, and the ritual for them also serves to create an illusion of social unity, because it brings together relatives and non-relatives in a shared activity. And by learning to deal with the visions, with the fear that sometimes come with the visions, you end up actually strengthening your social bonds, and the fear of the other, of the difference, fades away. So you get more connected to everyone who is experiencing it as well. And finally, the Shipibo Konibo, also from Peru, they prefer to have ceremonies in the dark so they can have clearer visions. They use it mainly for healing, and they also blow a lot tobacco, and it's a very important part of their ceremonies. They call the spirit of the vine Nishi Ibu, and during the healing process, the patient that is being healed needs to abstain from certain foods, and as well from fruits and meats, and they must also avoid contact with menstruating women and couples who have engaged in sexual intercourse. So the other group that I'm gonna bring some of the views are the Arawak speaking people. And the first of them is the Ashaninka from Peru and Brazil. They call ayahuasca camarampi, which actually means to vomit. So a lot of people vomit when they have ayahuasca. And for the Ashaninka, actually this is very good, because you are cleaning your body from any sicknesses, be it physical, emotional, or spiritual. And those who drink camarampi also need to abstain from eating and having sexual relations on the day they drink. And immediately after drinking, they kind of like spit their clothes so they can have a better effect of the beverage. And the intention of their ceremony is to interact with the spirits, be them good or bad. Normally they aim for the good, but sometimes the malevolent spirits can come as well. And another term they use to refer to the vine is Hana Neroka, which comes from Hana Nerichi. That means the celestial river. And here it's linked again to this celestial place, this river where they bathe their souls when they die, changing their skin and becoming eternal in their cosmology. And that is why as well they also say that it is the drink of salvation. The Matsichenka also call it Kamarampi. They are from the Andes, and they drink it at inside their house in the dark. They also chant. The purpose of the ritual is to make the shaman's soul travel to meet these other spirits, where they can receive and be given instructions, magical goods, enchantments, and so on. And for them, it's also a momentarily separation of the soul, which they call ishur, from the body. Something that can also occur during illness and definitely during death to them. And finally, the Piro, also from Peru, call it Kamalampi. They use it together as well with tobacco to attract good spirits. And those who participate in the ceremony also must abstain from eating some types of food, consuming alcohol, having sexual relations, and any contact with menstruating women. And the ritual is served. It aims to promote the healing of those who were sick. And Piro people claim that under the influence of Kamalampi, they not only travel to other places, but they travel through past and future. So they can see people that were alive in the past. They can talk to these people, but they can also see people who are going to be born in the future. And all these different beings are there to kind of give them what they call this very special knowledge. And they also use it to keep the continuity of life and to learn about what is the true reality, what goes beyond the appearance, beyond our eyes. So, as you could see, there are many different uses amongst indigenous groups, and I've just brought here really like one very small part of it. But to me, what is prominent of the use of ayahuasca is the fact that everyone tells about learning, talks about the knowledge, talks about what the medicine was telling to them, and so on. And this is the main reason why indigenous people call it actually a master, a teacher plant. So here are some quotes from 3 indigenous leaders I work with, and I find them very interesting. The first one, for example, he says that I never went to a university to study, but I live inside a university. I didn't enter. I was born inside. I live inside and I study every day, day and night, where silence and the plants are my teacher. And the other one said to me, ayahuasca is like my GPS. It's what teaches me where to go, my directions, what should be next in my life. And the last one is, ayahuasca is a healing plant. For us, ayahuasca is a drink of wisdom and knowledge reactivation. That's why it's not something everyone drinks, because it's not a game. It's a very sacred and serious plant. And then we have the shaman. So in different traditions, to become a shaman, one normally needs to undertake a period of dieting that generally takes a year, during which the apprentice undergoes a restricted diet and a total sexual abstinence. And during this period, the person continuously drinks ayahuasca until he or she have seen the spirits who help the shaman to heal. And other factors that can also influence this journey are the existence of a lineage of shamans in the family, personal vocation, purity of surrender to the process, intensity of dedication to the studies, and so on. So some scholars have kind of defined what the shaman means in this context. And to Freitas, the shaman is the mediator, someone who masters the code that gives intelligibility to the visions. He or she is also an interpreter of the experience. And to Viveiros de Castro, the shaman is a cosmopolitic diplomat, meaning someone capable of seeing other species as they see themselves. And this leads me to what has been called indigenous ontologies, which is something that I've been studying from environmental perspective, but they became really clear to me after I started studying ayahuasca as well. And I think that many people who experience ayahuasca end up experiencing these ontologies. So indigenous peoples are immersed in nature and in deep experiences with nature. They view and live the world as relational and animate. So humans are nature and vice versa. And they have deployed what has been called these exuberant technologies of enchantment that reinforce connections with places and beings. They perceive themselves as serving this other than human contexts rather than the opposite. And this is all based in care because for them is by caring to others that you have diversity and abundance that is actually affective and embodied as opposed to calculative and rational. And it's all this means that different beings, being human or non-human, they come together into being through different relationships with each other. So this also has been called relational ontology on social sciences. And for the Quechua-speaking people, for example, the individual is constantly becoming other, and people do not have this fixed identity. It's this transience and mutability are part of every being, including us. So moving on to the traditional and scientific practices, while the traditional use of ayahuasca differs among different groups, as we saw, the brew has been used by shamans for healing, magic, divination, and social rituals. And in many traditions, there is the use of feathers, burning resins, blowing tobacco, and sometimes they use other medicines as well to create a safe and protected space and facilitate the healing process. While in biomedical practice, there is a tendency to view ayahuasca as primarily a vehicle for making DMT orally active. While such a framing might allow for this better integration into our science, into Western medicine, it actually obscures the diversity of ayahuasca preparations, that some of them are even prepared without DMT. And indeed, it has, as we showed in the beginning, we saw in the beginning, a complex mechanism of action that has been considered by scientists as an unusual challenge to the pharmacologist. So to overcome such a challenge, what we did was, in Western science, we kind of created a standard brew that is made exclusively with B-copy and P varieties, and quantification of the compounds as well have also been established. And on top of that, biomedical research still had to employ the double bind design, where the variety of complex cultural, musical, social, spiritual interactions can't really take place. And diets, as we saw, are also very important in different indigenous traditions. And for them, the healing happens through the body and through the soul instead of in the brain or in the mind. Even when we think about the name psychedelic from the Greek mind manifesting, this tells a lot about these differences. While the indigenous names that we were seeing the past slides are related to the soul, the vital force, the scientific nomination is linked again to the mind, which for some groups, as the Yaominawa, is actually the shadow. So just by thinking that it is the gut that processes ayahuasca, what some even call our other brain, we could expand these possible understandings of it. And dieting is a variable that is very important to the indigenous, but is rarely studied and discussed in these experimental studies. So to give an idea, vomiting affects about 50% or more participants in ayahuasca studies, and it's usually classified as an adverse event. Very different, again, than how the Ashaninka would think and would classify it. So, as ayahuasca, there are many other compounds that research in the medical field already confirmed the value of indigenous knowledge. And this is a knowledge that does not depend on any human technology. It's ancient and is traditional, as the name states, and it comes greatly from observing and interacting with the natural elements around these people. And so it means that they have been studying, as they themselves call it, this biodiversity for centuries. And they say, we lost this type of study in our studies, and we should relearn how to listen to plants, to animals, and that they speak actually a language that we cannot understand anymore because we are not immersed in nature anymore as they are. And they talk about plant spirits or consciousness or soul, and what some may refer to as plant intelligence. And they go through these different plant and animal diets to understand what they have to tell them. So most of their knowledge come from these studies, which is something that they experience. But their ability for learning from nature and the capacity of applying such knowledge to build solutions is actually being threatened by some of the negative consequences of our modern world. And indigenous culture transmission happens from elders to youth orally, so there are no books, and very different than in our culture. And elders are dying, and the youth are losing the interest on ancient knowledge. But there is a growing effort to kind of like recover this knowledge nowadays, because we are perceiving more and more that we need this knowledge to move towards a better future. And there is also a growing body of research on the intelligence and teachings of different plants. They dominate every terrestrial environment, composing 99% of the biomass on Earth. So they are here much earlier than us and probably know much better about our Earth system. So by comparison, human and all the other animals are, in the worlds of plant neurobiologists, just traces here. So some studies are even arguing that we will just be able to transition into a more sustainable world with the help of plants. But yeah, this is a topic for another presentation. And just to finish, Einstein once said that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So if the materialistic rationality has brought us to the crisis we are in, the environmental and the health crisis, I think the moment also calls for this sort of like multidisciplinary knowledge, including indigenous people, in which life, agency, and conscious intentionality are not exclusive to humanity, and in which what cannot necessarily be measured or examined by the mind also has room to exist, because it does exist. And it's not just because a narrative is dominant that it implies that it's better than others. So to me, the Amazonian shamans and the people that live there in the forest as a whole are actually great scientists, and they are always looking for something, have always been great observers and experimenters. And the discovery of ayahuasca emerged not just as a gift from nature, as many of their myths narrate, but also as a result of these studies, this constant research and experimentation. And it's important also to remember that healing is not just about the substance as we could see. There's much more that we can learn from indigenous cultures in terms of healing with ayahuasca. So in terms of moving forward, there is this urgent need of, to me at least, of this conceptual, educational and institutional and as well entrepreneurial revolution, because as you could see, there are many pharmaceutical industries already interested in ayahuasca, and this revolution needs to be based in both traditional and scientific knowledges. So it's important to build this sort of like systems of reciprocity to support relationships between different cultures and the co-sharing of their knowledge to build creative solutions, the solutions that we really need in terms of moving forward. And we may as well ask, I think, how to promote this reciprocity between human and other than human beings, because we've been cooperating with other species, and as humans, we have only thrived because of such cooperation. So it's time, I think, to remind ourselves of this. And I will finish with this quote that reminds us how indigenous peoples have been resisting and have been through many revolutions already. But yet they are the ones who survived. And of course there are scars as well as adaptations, but not only did they survive but they also became a benchmark in terms of spiritual strength, forest preservation, sustainable development. So to me, it's more and more clear and urgent than ever that they can and should be the ones leading these new narratives and inspiring other ways of existing and of acquiring knowledge and of understanding the world as well. So thank you very much. Obrigada. Okay, I think there are... Repeat the question? Okay, so the question is, the concept of shaman would be normally someone that you would go to instead of someone who travels around. And the question is, what were the reasons for this sort of like globalization of shamanism in some sense, right? Is that okay? So I think there are many reasons for that, but in the case of the indigenous people that I work with, I think the main reason was already the dissemination of the medicine before their culture, before their shamanism, because in Brazil what happened was that the medicine started to be used by mainly 3 different religious groups. You may have heard, it's like Daime, UDV, União do Vegetal, and a Barquinha. So these groups, they started to disseminate the use of the medicine all around Brazil and then around the world as well. But then they brought their way of using the medicine to the world, which is based on Christianity values, and it's completely different from the indigenous uses and so on. So when the indigenous started to note that, they themselves felt, okay, we need to tell the story. That's not their medicine. That's like something that it's been used by us for millennia. So the world needs to know us. And at the same time, I think there is this story that they tell me that their ancestors told them that this moment of time would happen where the white and the outside people would come to them asking for their medicines, and they would have the duty to share. So they always tell me that because my first graduation is in law, so I'm always worried about their rights and and what's going on in the world and so on. And this is something that to me is very important in this story, because for them it's something that it's not their medicine. It's something provided by the forest. So everybody needs to have access to it. What they consider that it's not being recognized is their knowledge, because we wouldn't be able to have access to this medicine if it wasn't for their knowledge, right? So I think these two things, kind of like them trying to show themselves and tell the world that this is their history, this is part of their history, before everybody gets like a share of it, and at the same time, this story of their ancestors telling them that they needed to do that. So I think it's kind of a mission as well. And they also received help and support of many different people that went there and told them, okay, so let's go, let's do it, so let's share with the world. We can talk at the pub. Yeah, so I think the most important thing is trust. I think there needs to be trust from the scientific side, but also from the indigenous side. I think they are so traumatized as well to kind of co-create with us somehow. But still, they are very open to it, because in the past Ayahuasca conference, Indigenous Ayahuasca conference, they specifically stated that in their letter, and they kind of stated some ways of doing that. And I think the first step would be finding the intersections. So, for example, there is the dream part, right, which is for psychoanalysis and some of our science is very important as well in terms of thinking of behavior, of treating some patients. So dreams are a key part of psychiatry and psychoanalysis. So this would be a good intersection, understanding how they see dreams, and incorporating this sort of interpretation of the dreams as well. And I also think it's important to create this opportunities from a sort of this humbled space, because I think most of the part we come to them as the ones who know better than them. So I think changing this sort of hierarchical position is key, because if you don't change that, always our knowledge is going to be better. So while finding these intersections and again, I think, for example, looking at the process of healing the body instead of the mind, incorporating these views as they are scientific, and also in terms of other compositions, trying to understand how did they find about them, how was this experiments, which is going to be like their methods of finding these substances and so on. So I think it's basically, for me, there are many ways in terms of seeing these intersections, and then of course you need to have the opportunities for that, so getting scientists together with indigenous. But for me, the main thing would be to legitimize this knowledge and to really trust what they have to say, and vice versa, and them trusting on us as well, that we are not there just to kind of capture what they have to say and then run away and develop a pill or whatever, because this is how they see us in the end as well, always appropriating and so on. Well, I see that as, I think there is this concept of constructive conflicts, and I think there will be conflicts, and I think they are actually necessary, to be honest, to kind of like move things around, and change the path of things. And I think to reach a consensus, there's always this turbulent path, right? Where you disagree here, and then there is this sort of obstructions and different views and so on. Then you finally, okay, so how can we really move forward within these disagreements, But what happens now is that we don't have the opportunity to have these conflicts. We have a type of knowledge that is hegemonic and predominant in terms of the way we know the world and we operate in the world. And of course, this is a process. This is not going to change from night to day, so that's why I talk a bit about revolution. But just to see that the indigenous people are doing this opposite path of coming back to Europe, of coming to the US, and sort of like spreading their culture. For me, it's already a sign that this is happening. This is happening in different, sort of like contexts, and it's still already like hopeful. And I think people individually, by using these medicines, are changing as well, which is what you need as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is what we talked about in the psychedelics conference that Kenneth was involved as well, and And it also erases a culture. You are creating a problem. You are like kind of killing a culture, because once you create the pill, you don't need that thing anymore. And at the same time, it's what you said. This is what we've been doing already, and I wonder, like, because we already have the medicine. I keep thinking, like, if the money and the time that is being spent to develop a pill, because of course it's going to take like 10 years with the trials and all the things that needs to be done to develop the pill. If you couldn't legalize ayahuasca and have this knowledge sharing and these rituals more accessible to people, because a lot of people think, oh no, because I cannot go to Peru or Brazil, I need the pill or something, but the thing is that it's exactly what you're saying. It's not the same, and it's going to create other problems. And if we keep committing, if we keep making the same mistakes again, we are going to be in the same crisis again and again. So I'm totally with you. Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and again, we already have a medicine and we already have a lot of knowledge in relation to this medicine. And then it seems that no, we need to create something new and we need to create the whole knowledge about it. And yeah, again, it's like a lot of energy and time and a lot of money for that. So yeah, the fast foods, right? Like we need to press the button, take a pill and exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there are some research, but it actually says that it's very safe. Most of the results, like in terms of like monitoring everything. But I think even for the indigenous people, that's why they say you need to be careful, because I think this is another thing. I think the use of it has spread so much that it's changed completely as well. So people are taking more and more and more than you would normally take in a cultural context, So and sometimes you don't know what's going on in the brew, what people, how much like of what they put there, and this can be dangerous as well. So Yeah, I agree. I think it can. Well, there aren't many data in terms of these types of risks yet, but I think there are. I agree with you. I think there are risks, and especially because of the dose and the amount. So if you are not taking it again with someone who knows, who have learned, who has the knowledge of it, who actually did the brew and so on, there is a risk. And I think this is happening more and more. But I think the research is still catching up in terms of evaluating it, because to be honest, there is no research on rituals, and this is something that it's like being debated, like to kind of like bring the biomedical to the rituals, but then there is another side of it as well. But yeah, so the research that is done is very like there is this standard of ayahuasca that is being given. So this will be safe normally. There are no cases, at least from what I know, that they pointed out for risks. It's actually one of the substances that it's one of the safest ones. But I think in other contexts, like this sort of like neo-shamanism, or of people buying ayahuasca at the internet, and drinking alone at home and things like that, probably there are many risks. But yeah. Yeah. For a trip there, you mean? Okay. You mean the indigenous? Okay. No, there are many that are non-indigenous actually, and yeah. So traditionally, they wouldn't charge because they wouldn't need the money in the past, because again their subsistence come from the forest. But this has changed a lot, I would say, since probably the 70s or so, and after the rubber boom, where they started to get a lot of contact with white people, and they started to trade many things. Even alcohol entered into these communities in Brazil. They again almost lost their culture and everything, but other types of foods, and the access to cities, to even like the small villages, became better and better, because they got like better sort of like boats and so on. So of course and then in the 90s and 2000s, like it was like globalized, even for them in the forests. A lot of people going there, so they started to receive many people from different parts of the world to know more about the world and so on. And it was through this context that, for example, when you think about Daime, Daime is one of these religions, and they started to make a lot of money with ayahuasca for the religion, for religious purposes. So in the mind of the indigenous who is there, like kind of like sort of like suffering from colonization, and when they get sick nowadays, it's not like all the sicknesses that is resolved in the village. They sometimes need to go to a hospital or something, and to have access to it, it takes days, and you need food, you need the boat, you need this. So of course they need the money as well nowadays. And because they started to see these people earning so much money as well with their medicine, I think it kind of like, to them, it became something that, okay, it's something that we deserve as well. And I think they deserve, because we all make money. It's for me, it's a knowledge, and it's something that has no price, and it's sort of like, but I totally agree that it's something that became, it's sort of like this spiritual commodification, and you transform something into this way of making money. And I came to know people that were working with some of the indigenous that I work with, and they were making more money than the indigenous who were working all the night, chanting all the night, who brought the medicine with them, risking themselves to be in jail and so on. And then like the only like white man or white woman would charge like half of the price for the income made in the conference, and it's like totally, again, commodification, a new type of colonialism as well, and so on. Okay, thank you.